And so how does the United States deal with that spectrum of capability? So I honestly feel the structures first have to change. Someone should blow up the National Security Council. We established that National Security Council, and I was on it, and I can remember when the first issue regarding our critical infrastructure, the Clinton administration came up. The recommendation I forwarded is you really had to have that, not in the National Security Council overseen by a coordinated, but Leon Panetta's shop. Because the National Security Council is manned by and large by foreign policy. We get an FBI guy in there every so often. We get someone from the intelligence agency in there so often. But, and so you would find that there's this unease almost in the interagency. And so we really need to relook at this whole issue. But that gets me to my third point, and I'll leave the experts to talk about that and strong opinions, which is, if you really do believe in diplomacy, a strong diplomacy with consequences, it's not a cup of tea. I mean, 50% of all the gasoline that Iran needs and uses is imported. Who owns the faucet? How do you control that faucet? How do you sit there and negotiate so that it hurts diplomatically, economically, so they're willing to help come to terms with you? I always remember sitting in the White House. There was red lines that would come. And one day Dr. Perry came across, as I remember it was a Saturday, and briefed that 3 days hence we'd be deploying several battle groups, Green Amphibious Brigade and divisions to go to war with North Korea. Because a red line had been drawn. But those 8,000 rods, as we were negotiating, that were in the water there, would never be pulled out or be on active war. They began pulling them out. The red line had been drawn. There were consequences for that red line. His diplomacy was even on the forefront. And as you remember, Jimmy Carter called up the very so later, said everything's all right. But I always remember that when those 8,000 rods got pulled out in 2003, it didn't even hit the newspaper. There's a different way to approach with a strong diplomacy that deals with consequences, diplomatically, economically, militarily, at last solution, where we transform agencies. But one in particular I'd like to talk about is the backbone of this diplomatic effort. Not the rib cage, the backbone. This is way in the back of last resorts. Militaries don't fix problems, we stop problems. And they get fixed eventually by diplomacy, I believe, and policy. But what I mentioned at the beginning, the transformation that never happened. We are doing a roles and missions study that the Congress has mandated that in this last authorization bill that the Defense Department does. I think it's the wrong approach. You could call it roles and missions. It's not trying to differentiate any longer what the differences are among the services. We have rolled admission, military to death, since 1947 Key West Agreement. The issue is, what is common among our services? More, what is common among our services and our agency as we try to transform? It's not a foreign policy anymore, or a domestic policy. There's a national security policy. For the military, and I believe it steps up to the point, what is really common, and I think is the difference in warfare, is trying to change our measurement of greatness from how many, capacity, how many ships, how many divisions, brigades now, how many squadrons, how many wings, how many medals, to capability. Number of ships you need should be an output, not an input. And the real commons that we have control through that military, that backs diplomacy, has been the great commons of the sea, the great commons of the air. No one has control over those like we do. The commons that we don't yet control would assure us, and then do so much for our capability, is the great commons of cyberspace. What we in the military call C4 ISR. My belief is that as we think about changing our National Guard or dealing with terrorists and all, the ability to know. If we had known that Iraq was going to go into Kuwait, we wouldn't be there today. If we'd known that Japan was going to attack Hawaii, if we had known and gotten the information together into knowledge that there were people bent upon a bad thing on 9/11, we have the knowledge to either stop something or to say to someone, don't try. Today is not your day. We know. I bring that up because and I'll take any questions, as you step back and I watch the interagency do so many efforts to try to go about things, the lack of knowledge, whether it's in warfare or passing between agencies or even services, is something that I believe is missing in order to have the right military in the future to back up a new type of approach to diplomacy under a new process that I believe we have to have in the interagency. And I bring that up because the military is not unlike anyone else. We're motivated. And if you can find out what incentivizes someone, you can change the behavior. We were motivated in the military, first of all, by patriotism. I firmly believe. Number two, by promotion, just like anybody else. We fixed that in the First World War Nichols Act. We wanted jointness. And so we said, you don't get promoted. Not one of you will become an admiral or a general unless you've gone on a joint tour. Congress did it well. Didn't get a minutia. It stayed at, because it's a blunt instrument over here. And it stayed at the right level. The third incentive is who owns the money. We should be taking it away from our services and giving it to the joint group if you really want that common picture to be something where you don't have the services buying a ship over the ability to pass the picture from the sea to the soldier ashore, or the soldier ashore to the one at sea. And last, I'll talk about Iraq. I honestly believe that since about last spring, our inability to have a cohesive, comprehensive, thoughtful articulation of how the Democratic Party would be willing to deal with the aftermath of Iraq. However emotionally appealing it is to say, bring the boys home. And I'll use that phrase from World War II. That is not what is necessary. What is necessary is to end the war in the right way. It's a tragedy having this thing. And our inability, I feel, to lay out how we would deal with this in a thoughtful way, potentially a bipartisan, I believe, I think, is one where we do not recognize that this is not Bush's war. This is our war. Whenever men and women are in the lofty distinction of overseas, it is our war. We will own this war come next November, or even now, the piece of legislation you believe is going to happen. And Americans are tired of this war, but they also want to salvage the best from it. And so, as we go about our business, without that thoughtful, comprehensive approach, I think we are doing ill justice to the nation. And I honestly think to the party that is secondary concern, quite frankly, but needs to do that if it really does believe it's going to eventually lead to national security. There is one defining issue now in Iraq. And I think that we have to think very seriously that we will own this. How will we deal with it? Because this nation sent someone to war, and ending it appropriately should be our responsibility.